Welcome to GearWire with Crosstalk, episode 34. I'm here with Drew Krag.
What's up, everybody?
And Mr. Chubbs Britton Wetherald. Or Britton Chubbs Wetherald. I'm not sure if that's right or not.
I don't know. My nicknames kind of like change on a daily basis because of all this. I'm just the skinny guy with the smart-ass comments.
All right, so the skinny smart-ass guy. That's what we're going to call you from now on. We are going to look at gear announcements for the week. We are going to look at home studios and all sorts of setups. But first, let's talk to Mr. Drew over here about your home studio setup. What do you do, Drew?
Basically, I'm a producer for LoungeFidelity.com. We're an independent record label out of Chicago, Illinois. And I'm also a performer, professional jazz guitar player, guitar teacher, instructor. I basically do anything and everything that is music. I'm totally in love with music and focused on devoting my life to it. So I'm here to share the wealth and information.
That's admirable and awesome. Now, you do the home studio segments on GearWire, obviously.
That's correct. Check them out. It's the home studio workshop. I basically walk through my home studio for everybody, show the gear that I've been using, how to use it, how to plug it in, how to make it sound good, etc. You know, everything that is home studio production. Basically, the premise is recording on a low budget. So that's something we're all pretty used to.
And there's some baking that goes on too, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit of baking the pedals there.
Yeah, baking guitar pedals.
Awesome. Well, Britton, over to you. Who are you? What have you done with your past? What are you doing with your life? And what kind of gear do you use?
All right. Well, it's kind of goes as I went to school for audio engineering at one of the major schools. I do not want to promote, so. And then I went to work for some larger studios in LA as a runner and various other things. Did a lot of freelance work between then with various other producers. You know, I produced many different sorts of music, you know, and I also play my own stuff, which has ranged from different projects and continually work on that evolution. But it's a different story.
All right, fantastic. My name's Bill Holland. I'm sort of the host / moderator / Barbara Walters wannabe here on the program. And my experience comes from sound design. I've played piano forever, but I got into sound design when I was in college, and I sound designed for theater, Honda. I worked sound for various concerts like Ludacris and Sugar Ray. And now I'm a professional electro DJ and producer in Chicago. But I also obviously am a video producer for GearWire.com, as you may have seen me on here. So we all have a wide range of talents. We've got Mr. Jazz Guitarist, recorder over here. We have Britton, who does what he does.
Skinny guy.
He specializes
Smart-ass
in
comments.
being metal. That is what he does. He is metal. And I'm the nerdy techno guy. So there we go. Okay, so now I'm mainly an electronic producer, but obviously I bring in guitarists, bassists, or saxophonists whenever I please to record things. But let's talk a little bit about everybody else's setup, guys.
Basically, I run a DAW that is focused on, we got the Focusrite Sapphire Pro 26 sound card, and I really enjoy it. It sounds great.
Which DAW?
We use Steinberg Nuendo, Ableton Live, and Reason, and we run it out of an HP computer, which is kind of crappy, but you know, it's actually worked pretty well for us for the price.
Awesome.
On top of that, we basically have 3 separate recording rooms in our studio. Small, medium, and large. One's completely dead, one's a little bit more live, and one is absolutely huge. So we try and incorporate a lot of live elements to digital recording, and also more like electronic elements, you know, like soft synthesizers and stuff like that. So it's a nice little mix of, you know, sampled sounds and live sounds that we're able to create in our studio.
Awesome.
That's
and of course, you do the home studio videos on GearWire.
Absolutely. So check those out if you're interested in more setups like that, you know, as far as combining digital and live elements.
Great. Britton?
Honestly, as far as home studio stuff is, it's very simple for me.
You've got a bucket and a string and a mop.
No, I utilize. I'm of the opinion, and how I started out doing studio stuff was that you go to bigger places for when you actually need to record, and that's where I have utilized some of the better equipment on in the world, and have been fortunate for that, you know, and trained on that. I know how to work on that stuff, such as SSL and like Neve, and you know, used API stuff, and you know, all from using in other studios, and that's kind of where I come from. I come from a in my opinion, a dying breed of engineer, where it's less about their home studio setup and more about where they work, because I'm not going to fit an SSL in my room. You know what I mean?
That's
You
true.
could, but you wouldn't have a bed.
Yeah,
You just like sleep under
I
it.
wouldn't have a house. It would just be an SSL.
You could have a tent. I mean, that'd be
Somehow I think
cool
you'd make
in the
that work.
studio.
But you know, like I use my
have to look.
my home setup is extremely simple, because the fact is that it's used to create scratch tracks. It's just ideas. It's a sketch pad. So I use an inbox from back in the day with Pro Tools, Reason, and I also use Ableton. I'm more using Ableton right now than Pro Tools because I got an old computer.
Well, it's pretty flexible too, honestly. I mean, I've started doing. I was trying to stay away from doing recording with Ableton for a while, and now I've started using it, and I really can't. Like, going back to Sonar is harder and harder because it's just like, why don't I just do it in Ableton? It's all there.
Well, I mean, just the ability to, I mean, like, as far as critique is concerned, like, I love using Pro Tools as long as it's like a TDM setup and we're really trying to get the most out of sound. But like, as far as like, wow, I need to create something and I need to do it fast.
Right.
I mean, I'm probably still a little faster on Pro Tools, but Ableton's close second. It's like, oh, I'm just going to record this guitar part that I have this idea for, and then I'm going to lay. Then you can just drag and drop an effect there. You don't have to set it up. You just like drag it in, turn a couple of knobs, and you've got a good approximation of what you're looking for.
And then you can really tweak that when you go into a studio to work on it. Sure. Yeah. You have that idea already down, so you don't have to sit there going, oh, well, what do I do? And you're not wasting dollars.
Yeah, I also have a couple quarter-inch tape machines that I use for other stuff, and I mean, I've invested money into my guitar rig, which is all vintage stuff. So I mean,
Sweet. Well, that's key to getting your sound anyway. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you're recording with at that point. You're going for more what you actually want your sound to sound like.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of pre-production as far as that stuff is concerned, is that you want to do everything you can to alleviate costs, because if I'm going to go record, I'm going to record at somebody else's place. I mean, I'm either going to have to spend money or somebody else is going to have to spend money to do that job, because I don't have, we live in Chicago. I don't have the space or the money or the funds to invest in a decent sized home studio that would serve my application. So I'd rather just, rent time out.
Excellent. Well, I'm Bill Holland. I'm a professional DJ from Chicago. Although I started as a sound designer, I've worked on bigger live boards. I've done sound all over the city and outside the city. But I'm also a electronic producer, and I'm in the band The Image Front, which is like an industrial electro, what my lead singer describes as ultra glam band. But I guess I'm the head engineer for that technically. But I've worked on all sorts of systems at home. I originally started doing more hardware. I have actual quarter-inch tape recorder like you do. I have an Alesis QS88 because I'm actually a piano player. I have turntables, and then I mainly am software. I'm using Sonar 6 with Ableton, Reason, and Complete 4. And then I'm also using a Krag K25 controller with, I just picked up the Behringer that actually, believe it or not, in Daft Punk's Pyramid, despite all the Moogs and the different rack mounts they have, everything is controlled with a Behringer controller. It's about yay big.
Shit.
Yeah, I think it's like BSR 2000 or something like that.
Wow.
But it's stable. It's solid. And so I'm using that to control everything right now, and you can really...
Wow, Behringer actually made something that's not a piece of shit.
They make one product, and evidently it's used by Daft Punk.
One product that's used by Daft Punk out of
So, if you're making French house, you might want to pick that up.
Yeah, man, that's...
Because I know how much you love French house.
Dude. Okay.
I'm insulting you now, aren't I?
No, man. Daft Punk was awesome. So was Justice is pretty cool.
Justice is awesome. They had 20 Marshall stacks on their stage.
Yeah, I mean, they're not as good as Daft Punk, but Daft Punk kind of is like, if you listen to all the source material, they're just a remix group essentially.
Oh yeah, they just don't say that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're talking about USB guitars today. This is our Tech Talk segment, and we will be talking about how much Britton loves USB guitars, and a little bit about USB guitars versus miking a traditional amp setup or versus amp modeling. So do you want to, I'm thinking you want the floor on this first.
All right. The thing is you got to tackle a couple of issues when you're starting with USB guitars and digital recording, amp modeling, and so on and so forth. And you're dealing with a huge array of stuff that is all around in the same arena, that you kind of go down to the classic, like, is it okay? Does it sound as professional or as good to use modeling and processors and digital realm stuff for something that is inherently analog. There's a lot of people who sit on both sides of the fence for this. First thing we're gonna like think about though and talk about is USB guitars. Now personally, I think that they sound kind of like your mom getting run over by a car, but like, you know,
What does that sound like again?
like utter
for
and
demo.
total ass.
Like,
But like the thing is that we gotta kind of come down to why that sounds like why I'm saying
Why
this.
it sounds
yeah,
like
yeah.
ass.
Yeah, instead
Okay.
of just me going off and saying like it sounds like butt crack, we're gonna go and just like think about this logically. You have a magnetic pickup that's wound, all right, and it's electronic. All right, it goes through a processor and becomes digital signal, but it doesn't have time to actually like the signal's not actually changed. It's a representation of exactly what the pickups are representing, all right? And it actually does a disservice to what electric guitars should sound like. Right? There's no like the tone circuits and everything else.
well, there's none of the physical action going on that you have with an actual guitar and an actual amp.
Well, that's not as much the issue as the physical as the actual physics.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
like, 'cause like
That's what I mean.
yeah.
But I'm using the word
yeah, the physics of like
the science,
yeah,
if you will.
because you don't have your electrical signal is no longer electric at all. It's,
Right.
It's ones and zeros, and it's a digital representation that removes some of the space and some of the other issues. One of the key issues is that like you don't get the same amount of waveform like waste that you can get out
Right.
of recording. If you mic to a DAW, like if you take a guitar and an amp and you plug it in and you plug in a mic in and you run it through the preamp and then run it through the DAW, you have a whole lot of noise that will get cut off. It's like natural dither, so to speak.
Well, there's natural dither, and then also you can't really saturate it in the digital realm the way you can with analog. I mean, like
That's
it's
very
like
true.
with a digital mixer, if you go into the yellow, you might be clipping and you might not even know it. Whereas with analog, you can push that into the red for a while and get,
You
you know,
get-
it's real distortion. It's not.
Well, it's harmonic distortion.
Right, it's harmonic distortion,
Which
it's
is
not
different.
the clipping that you get with digital.
Or which is called digital distortion or the actual zero. Because see, when you hit red in like any sort of interface, it's actually it's a hard limiter, and that's why it
Right.
sounds really bad. Is that you're actually not reaching zero still. I mean, you're hitting like 0.00 -1. You know what I mean? Like it's just like it's very close, but it's a hardline limiter, and that's why you get all that really bad distortion. I kind of digress for a second though. The thing is that like USB guitars they don't sound like a real guitar. They sound almost synthetic. They have a weird warble in the actual
Robot
string.
rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like not even like in a clever kind of cheeky sort of thing. It's an actual literal phasing of the sample rate and so on and so forth. That's a digital reconstruction of something that should be inherently analog first.
I mean, I think, granted, it's not an exact replica of guitar sound, but I would think you could use it to get some pretty cool other sounds out of it.
Perhaps.
You ran it through something. I mean,
Well,
right?
that's the issue though, is that it's not meant to be a controller. It's literally taking and converting analog sound into a digital realm. So it doesn't actually do anything but other than try to model what a guitar would sound like. through
well, I
the
mean,
pickups.
I guess what I'm saying is that's what the 303 was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it's never been, very few people actually use the 303 for its intended purpose. So I'm saying there could be some other thing you could use USB guitars for that isn't modeling a guitar.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm just like from what I looked at as far as all the USB guitars on the internet, none of them offer any sort of like change in sound or anything like that. It's not like a synthesizer where you can do patch changes and shit like that.
Oh, so you don't even get that advantage.
No.
It's just like instead of
If
patch cable into the amp or
Yeah.
even into like a lexicon interface
Yeah.
or something, it's just, you're plugging it
if
in.
they did something like that, that'd be pretty cool.
That'd be pretty
Yeah,
badass.
that would,
Yeah.
Well, then you're dealing with a whole different beast and a whole different ideology.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
like right
Yeah.
now, what you're trying to do is the whole issue that you have is that USB guitars are trying to simplify recording for a guitar player that, and make it ease of use and acceptable. Sorry. For the regular consumer, where there should be no place for that. There's a reason why it's more complicated because it sounds better. I mean, like if any jackoff can get a USB guitar and create a hit record, then why the fuck am I sitting here talking to anybody?
That's a good point.
All right. I mean, like that's that's why they don't sound good. That's why they will never sound good. Is that they just don't have any breadth, any sort of real nuance to them. They just sound like some guy trying to hack away on something that sounds not quite like a guitar, but it's really damn close.
Although I think like a MIDI guitar eventually, like something with, like you said, interchangeable patches could be
Yeah,
cool,
that
because
would
then
be
it's
cool.
like it's like a keytar but without keys.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
That would
So
be
then
cool.
you're not really necessarily even playing a guitar, you're playing a synthesizer.
Well, then you don't even really need the pickups. I mean, then you're dealing with something completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
and that's completely cool. Again, it's a totally different idea, totally different. Like, it's like Vox made a thing back in the 60s with their fans. They were called guitar organs, right? Where they basically tried to take a Vox Jaguar or, sound and basically these transistor organs, shrink the circuit down and put it into a guitar. It was a failed concept completely.
Right.
But it's an awesome idea. Like, who doesn't want to be able to play, like, like nasty, like distorted like organ on your guitar?
That would be awesome.
Right.
Yeah,
That'd be-
like
that'd be
everybody,
sweet,
everybody's like, yeah, that's an awesome idea. But then it's just like, it was poorly executed and everything else. And this is kind of this is the new sort of thing where it's like poorly executed ideas, half-baked schemes just to make another buck. It's just a consumer trap.
It's like we have USB, we can make USB audio, let's put it in there without
Yeah.
really thinking about how it's going to sound or why we're doing it.
It'd be like, all right, like let's take and make USB basses. Let's make USB grand pianos.
Right.
Acoustic grand USB pianos. All right.
You've got this incredible instrument and then a little tiny wire transferring all the sound.
That is completely
That's
destroying it.
destroying it, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's an acoustic instrument.
Yeah, like, all right, you could also have a USB violin.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to come back to that a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about amp modeling, but for the moment, this has been Crosstalk. I'm Bill Holland. This is Drew Krag
What's up?
and Chubbs Wetherald. And we'll be back with more on GearWire.com.
Okay, very nice. Can we start the next segment since you haven't really spoken much?
No.
So let's start the next segment with you.
Was that,
Yeah, I
was that
think-
decent material for you guys?
Yeah, it was good. Bill, if you could throw the
Scathing
first
enough?
one
To Drew.
Yeah, what's the next topic?
next segment.
It's actually, this is a good one for you because it's about guitar rig
Guitar rig.
GTR,
Okay, yeah.
like amp modeling versus miking an amp
Oh, sure.
and
Oh, shit.
when you'd use either.
Yeah, I'll open it up. I'll be pretty. This is good because somebody posted a comment on one of my home studio workshops about not understanding my point as far as how I would just use it as like a
A scratch track?
yeah.
And let me ask you, Bill, when you throw it to him, Drew, if you could look into that
That one.
camera.
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
And I'm ready when you guys are. Just go ahead and give me a clap, and we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Welcome back to GearWire.com. I'm Bill Holland, and I'm here with Mr. Britton Wetherald, who I'm sure you all know, and Drew Krag.
Hello, hello.
And we're going to be talking a little bit about amp modeling versus actually miking an amp and why programs like GTR3 and Guitar Rig are becoming very popular and whether or not those are necessarily things you want to use for professional recording. So I'm going to throw this to Drew since you use Guitar Rig.
Yeah, I do.
Tell us a little bit about what you use it for and what you think of it
Actually,
overall.
I use it basically to save time in the studio. Like, I'm in the studio and I want to lay down a guitar track that I have an idea for the sound, but I don't really necessarily have the time to set up the amp that I want to get the sound with, the appropriate pedals, and deal with all that at the, and go into the other room and record it. I could just plug direct, open up Guitar Rig, and find the sound that's pretty close. Now, I use it for like scratch tracks, meaning I'll record it to get the sound in the song quickly, and then later I'm going to go back into it and record it right when I have the proper time. Now, my personal opinion about it is it's great for quick scratch track,
Right.
quickly finding the sound you want. And there's a lot of sounds in there, and you can
Yeah.
actually customize, the exact effects you want, etc. But as far as I would never use it on like the end result of a track. Like you were saying, professional uses.
Right.
I would, and in the end, I'd record it for real. I'd find the proper amp, get the right guitar, get all the effects, chain them up, get rid of the buzz, get everything going, and record it right. And
Well,
that's
especially since you're doing like a lot of jazz, but you do other things.
I
too,
do all
right?
sorts of stuff,
Okay.
really. But I mean, it's very nice. It's versatile. That's
Yeah.
what I like about it. But at the same time, the last thing I want to hear when I plug in a guitar, and this goes with like USB guitars as well.
Right.
Last thing I want to hear when I plug in a guitar is a digital signal.
Of course.
You know what I mean? I can hear the difference between digital signal and a real like analog, just real wave, and I much prefer the sound of that or vinyl or whatever. You know what I mean? The last thing I want to hear when I plug in a guitar and listen to the sound coming out is a digital signal. That's kind of harsh to the ear. So my own professional opinion is to use it for scratch tracks and for when you're on a time constraint, or if you record a track that sounds like crap and it needs help, that might be another solution, a way to use it in the studio. But for the most part, it's for scratch tracks. And it's on the right path, and maybe someday I'll change my mind. Digital is getting better and better and better. Of course, it'll always still be digital. So
right.
I'm kind of curious to see where it is in a few years. Give it another try. And
well, and even we were at AES a few weeks ago, and we saw the new version of GTR 3, and that was pretty cool. That actually sounded really good.
Really?
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with that. And that's from, I believe that's from the Waves guys, right?
Yeah, that's a Waves program. I mean,
Okay.
the thing is that like you're never going to get. I don't care how many bit depths you can get, unless you start like recording in like weird PCM sort of like outside of 2496. Like you start doing the 2-bit recording on a like megahertz scale, which is like
Right.
more accurate. And nobody's going to convert to that right now. Like there's only one recorder that they sell consumer wise that's like under like $1,000, and it's a Korg recorder that does that sort of weird encoding that sounds pretty good.
Depends what you're going for, too. I mean,
See, I have a friend who's an engineer, and he's like,
Okay.
all right, like he's like, hey man, like I can deal with the pod, the Line 6 pod. Everybody knows if you look at the stuff that I say
Right.
about Line Pod, I fucking hate Line Pod. All right, like I think they're the worst company, or Line 6, the fucking pod. Like they suck, and they really piss me off. But he said to me, he was like, dude, and he makes his money engineering, so you got to give him props. And he's like, dude, I want people to bring in pods because they're easy to set up.
I know people who use them a lot, actually.
Yeah, and he's like, for certain sounds, it sounds great. And I'm like thinking about this. I'm like, well, honestly, new metal, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, they're crappy solid state overdrive tube model distortion. I'm like, I guess why not? And that puts a huge thing into question about perspective. Like, what are you trying to do with
Right.
whatever project that you're trying to do? And that's so esoteric that I sound kind of like a dickhead. I understand.
Well, and it's like, too, what are you going for? Because, like, if I'm like, okay, well, I want to make something that sounds like, 70s glam rock, like T-Rex or something.
You're going to need a
You're
tube amp.
going to need a tube amp, exactly.
And a nice mic. But
right.
aside from that, I mean, like I did a mix one time, and I had to use Amplitude. And I mean, like it's like for what it is, it gets the job done.
Yeah.
I was really pissed that I wasn't allowed to actually like reamp or anything like that. I'm really staunch about these sort of things. So like it's like putting my name on stuff like that. It's like, yeah, it's dollars, and that's why you do some stuff like that.
Right.
It doesn't sound as good. It doesn't sound like a Bassman. It doesn't even really sound like anything other than just like a modeled amp. Like the thing is that all modeled amps, no matter if it's British, Vox style or Marshall lead or whatever that they're modeling after, it doesn't really sound like what you're thinking it's going to sound like. It sounds not even like an approximation. It just sounds like what they guessed. Like they just like blindfolded themselves and started throwing darts at each other.
It's a good comparison. Well, I mean, the presets, too. You got to be aware of presets. This is a big problem I run into when using Guitar Rig because, I was recording this song at my friend's place, and he has a Guitar Rig 3, and we were using it. And a big problem is the presets, so many of them sound like complete, just pretty much, ass. So you have to go through and actually tweak everything, decide the amp you want, do your mic placement or whatever. But even on top of that, outside of Guitar Rig, I'm throwing a compressor and a limiter on top of that, and I'm EQing the thing. And I mean, you have to. That's if you're going to use this, and you don't have a lot of money, you can't go out and buy a tube amp. You might have like a PV practice amp your mom bought you when you were in high school.
See, but that's even a huge misnomer. I mean, like how much does Guitar Rig cost?
Like what, 200?
Yeah,
$199?
$200. You can go to like some used music shop, just spend a few weeks looking for it. You could get a Laney Pro lead for about $400 to $200. You know what I mean?
But then you're going to need a really good mic too. I mean, you don't need a good mic, but I'm saying like that's
90% of the stuff that's recorded on rock records is used with an SM57,
57,
which is a $100 microphone.
Okay. I see,
All right.
I see what you're saying.
You can spend just as much money on amp modelers. Amplitude retails for $300.
Right.
You can go find a decent used tube amp that will do what you need it to do for half the money and get everything else you need. All right. And get a better sound. And that's like the biggest thing is that like, oh yeah, we got presets on there. What's a preset gonna do? You just said it doesn't do anything. So you're gonna spend time fiddling around with the fake knobs is just as much as you're fiddling around with the real ones.
No, I totally agree. And honestly, with hardware, you're more likely to actually find a result sooner.
Recall's a pain
I think
in the
really
ass.
the only time, I mean, in our case, we use it because we bought Complete for our studio and all this, but
Love Complete.
Exactly. And so we have it, and then we have a Telecaster somebody left at my friend's house. And I'm like, well, I used to play guitar, and I don't have my guitar anymore because it's my uncle's. I had to return it. So in that case, it makes sense. But if you're a serious guitarist, I would recommend getting your own amp and miking the damn thing.
Well, I mean, even if you're just like, you do other things. It's like it's a synth. You use synths and stuff like that. So you're like a guitar laying around.
Right.
Oh, I have this. Whatever then. But
We
like,
sample.
you know, yeah.
Well, anyway, we'll come back to this, but this has been Crosstalk, and I'm Bill Holland, and we are on GearWire.com. Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.
And Britton. We'll talk to you guys later.